And this is going to be the demo for how to do the rock lab. And please feel free to ask questions in the chat as I do the demo. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that this isn't meant to be a live demo. So if the question is, hey, can you go back and show me that again? Because I'm trying to follow along and I didn't quite catch that. The answer is going to be no. You're meant to watch this, kind of get some seeds in your head, and then go back later, watch this video, and do the lab. So let's see. Yeah, so yeah, if you find questions, please ask. The one big thing that's been really helpful for me with learning this program and navigating this program is popping out this little window here. And let's see if I can get it up. There's like three little dots, and you should be able to pull this over and you get this tree view. And this tree view is a lot like, I think it's called what, the outliner in Maya, where you can kind of jump around to, like, you can pick different objects and stuff like that. I would definitely recommend opening that. And that's just like this little thing here. It's kind of hidden. And it can be very helpful with trying to navigate to the different kinds of areas. And I did like how the one video kind of explained this, that this is almost more like a file system, like it's more like an OS. And that's kind of like how you can think of it. Because that's kind of like what this viewport down here is. You kind of have to go around to your different like files for different things. Like you have your objects, you have your materials, you have, you know, when we start, we can add some, those are the two ones we're gonna be working with today, but it can be very helpful to go in there and work with this. And some other things to point out, changing what you see in the view. Well, actually, let me just add an object first so we can see some changes to it. So with this rock video, we are going to start with using, we're gonna create our rocks by starting off with a sphere. And we're going to use it to create a larger rock. And then what we're going to do with that is we're going to shatter that rock into smaller pieces to make other rocks out of it that look like they kind of go together. I just like to, I'm doing it this way just because it's really cool to shatter things. So I wanted to show you how to do that because it's really neat to do. Not because this is necessarily like, this is the only way to make random rocks. I just think it's really cool. So we're going to start off with a sphere. There's multiple ways to do that. Usually what I do is I right click inside of here. I need to make sure I'm in the object. See, it says objects. I'm going to right click, I'm going to type sphere, and I'm going to set down a sphere node. And this is going to be the start of the rock. Notice now that over here in our tree view, if we open it up, we can start to see different things. So if we need to go back and select the sphere object, we can easily kind of come in here and select it. I do need to make some changes to it, and I need to go actually inside of the sphere. So this is, you can almost think of this as like a big folder that's going to end up holding my entire rock. I actually need to go inside of here to make changes to that sphere and add more nodes. So I'm going to double click in here. So notice it now says geometry node. So you can almost think of object as the whole thing, kind of like in Maya when you select like an object, you're not selecting like the vertices or the edges or the faces, you're selecting that whole entire complete thing. So if we need to actually alter this, we need to go inside of that sphere. And while I'm at it, I think I'm going to rename this. Since we are going to be making a rock, I might as well rename this to rock so that we don't get kind of confused. So this whole thing's going to be a rock. And then inside of it, I'm just double clicking on it. We're going to start with this sphere. And I'm going to click on the sphere, like I'm going to click this little icon itself so I can select this node. We know we have a node selected because it's outlined in yellow. And the one thing, I need to make a couple changes to it. Sorry, I have notes on my other one. I'm just making sure I make the right changes. We don't want this to be a primitive. We need to change this to polygon. And notice we do get a nice like try mesh on here, I'm just holding down the Alt key to zoom in and do like all my different buttons do different things. So you can navigate the viewport that way. So I'm changing it to polygon. I want to up the frequency right here. This will give me more, more depth to this. And I'm not sorry, more resolution to this. So we'll be able to do some more fun stuff in the next step. So after this, I do want to add a new node to here. And to do that, I'm just going to right click. And the node I want to add is called the mountain node. And then if you did watch that video, I wanted you about proceduralism. These are the first steps of that same one. So I'm going to hook this up. I'm just going to click and drag. And notice that nothing changed. That's because what is visible in your viewport is whatever node has the blue dots. That's why it has like the eyeball for display render. So if I actually want to see the results of this, I do have to click it on and we can see the results. So though that's kind of also the nice thing about this is like we can go back to previous stages and we could be like, you know what? Maybe we're seeing this, but this node is selected because like, hey, what happens if we take down or add more frequency? Like we jump this up to 100. As it, we can see it change in real time down on a later node. We also have the ability that we can go back and turn this one on and see what's happening in this node. So I don't need it to be at 136 is plenty, but that is, yellow means what we're currently editing, but the blue means what is visible in the viewport. So that's kind of something you have to make sure that you are keeping an eye on. And okay, so we got the mountain. I do want to adjust this kind of like they did in that other tutorial one. I'm going to make a, oops, hold on, sorry. So I'm check my notes on this. The one I'm going to change it to, oops, I got to select it back again, is the noise type from simplex to whirly cellular. It looks kind of like this. And like we can make some adjustments to this if we needed to. Like we could take down the max octaves. We can change this around a little bit if we wanted to. Maybe mess with the roughness. But we can kind of get something a little bit, we can play around with this and see what we get. Why am I getting it a little bit different on this one? Give me 1 second. Oh, that's right. I don't like this. If you turn off center noise, it tends to look a little bit more rock-like. Thought I just unclick center noise to get something like this. So this is going to be our big main boulder that we're going to shatter into smaller pieces. So the first thing we probably want to do with this is we did want to get it kind of noisy. Like we wanted to kind of get as much detail in there so we can get that noise detail, but it might be a little bit too high poly for the next couple of steps. So the next thing I'm probably going to do to this is do a poly reduce, which is a way for it to cut down polys. So those of you who are in photogrammetry, this is kind of the start of you could use stuff like this to make a low poly of your high poly photogrammetry models. So I'm going to drop this into here, and and again, it's selected. I don't see it because I have to click the blue, and then I can actually see the changes I'm about to make to it. So if you've worked with ZBrush and you've worked with like their similar stuff, that's, this should feel very familiar. If not, it's a very simple thing. All poly reduce does is it figures out how to cut out polygons so you have a smaller poly object. And we have a couple different ways we could do that. Underneath the reduction amount right here, we can just tell the percentage that we want to keep. So I can just slide this down, and if you do not have a very good computer, be very careful about going too fast on things. This can have issue, like I've crashed it, but I will show you kind of a tip if you are trying to do something. It's definitely a lot more stable this time than the last time I've played with this program, which is nice. But if you notice it hanging, if you look down here in the bottom left, I'm sure this might pop up at some point. It might say that it's like trying to do something or trying to calculate something. You'll see something down here and it'll say like press escape to cancel. If something's just hung up and it's taking too long and you're kind of worried, just hit that escape key to kind of like go back to a change, because that's happened to me where I slid sliders a little bit too fast and it was trying to do some kind of crazy calculation and it kind of seemed like it was locking up Houdini, so I quickly escaped out of it and I didn't lose my files. So just, it's this bottom left, you'll see it like text down here telling you what it's doing, and you should be able to hopefully escape out of it if you run into an issue. But with that said, we can, do a percentage, and you can honestly see it's not really affecting the silhouette that much. Like you might be able to just pick like a percentage, and we are going to eventually do another another reduction. So we don't have to go too crazy. So we could do a percentage, or we could say output polygon count. Like if you're like, nope, it absolutely needs to be 5,000 polys. You can just set a hard number to that and it will cut it down to that many. And it is in tries, which is fine. We're not scared of tries in this course. So maybe I'll just keep it at this one. That's a pretty decent one. Maybe up it a little bit, maybe 8,000. Just to give it, because we are going to reduce it a little bit later. So we can now reduce it down. I would like to note too, the other nice thing about this tree view on the left is notice that we see all of our nodes here too. So like we can kind of go in and if you, because sometimes it can be kind of hard to click, if you have like a lot and you're kind of zoomed out and you're like, oh man, I need to select the node, but you're just clicking all over the place. You can select them here too. And notice that they do come up here for you to change change parameters. So this can be another method for you to do that. Selecting them here as well as here. I'm telling you, this is super game changer for when you're trying to transition from Maya to this program. It's incredibly helpful to keep that up. Okay, so we have our poly reduce. The next thing I want to do is we want to do our fracture, and we're going to fracture this and then into a bunch of little pieces so that we can have a bunch of smaller rocks. Looks like they come from the same thing. And again, it's really cool and fun to do this. So that's why I chose this method rather than just like animating the time on the mountain to get different shapes, because I think this is neat. This is really neat. This is going to be neat. So the first thing we need to do with this is we need to make a scatter point cloud so that it knows where to fracture from. We're going to, well, I can put down the fracture node first so you can see what it needs. If we type fracture, we're going to do the, make sure I choose the right one. I think it's this one. Is it this one? Let me look at it. Nope, it's the first one, just the regular fracture, not the points one. And let's see. So we need to have two inputs into the fracture. And if we hover over the little red arrows, it tells us what it's expecting. And you can also, down here to see what is going to be coming out of the bottom of it too. So if we look at this first red one, it says required geometry to fracture. So that one's pretty easy. The geometry we're going to fracture is going to be this poly-reduced rock. So that's an easy one. This one wants points for the cells. So we need to give it like some points in space of where it's going to fracture it. And we can kind of use the current model to help us with that. We don't, like it, we need to first do, and we're going to build it over here. We're going to pull it off of the mountain itself. We're not going to do the poly reduce. We're going to actually pull off the mountain so we get a little bit, it's going to work a little bit better. We're going to use an ISO offset node. And we're going to feed that into there. And that should be good as is. And this is what it looks like. It kind of just turns it into a volume of where our potential points can be inside of here. So we turned it into like this weird sort of volume. And then we are going to put a scatter node. And this is where we're going to get, so we're going to pull that into there. And it makes us a bunch of points inside of that volume of potential places that we can fracture our stuff. And Anthony said it kind of reminds him of Bifrost point cloud. You can do similar stuff, what you're talking about with this program, and that's with the photogrammetry stuff, I think they do kind of recommend that so you can make yourself a watertight model and not have like weird kind of geometries sometimes. So yes, all that kind of stuff is also in this program. But each of these little scatter points is going to be where our rock fractures. And we probably don't want to have our rock break up into this many points. It's going to be a little bit ridiculous. We probably want to reduce this down to a decent amount of points. And let me just make sure I know how many I did it down to. So I decided ultimately, and I do want to remember this number because I'm going to need to use this later, is I only want 15, my rock to fracture into 15 pieces. So I'm going to type 15 into the force total count. And you can see I now have 15 random, they're probably really hard to see. They're literally black points on my screen. 15 little points somewhere in that cloud of my rock. You could always, mess with the seed if you don't quite like where that's at to get those little points in there. But these are going to be where we're going to fracture the main rock. So now that we have points to fracture, we can now hook this into here. And I'm going to click the on button, and it doesn't look like it did anything because it's still stuck together. So it looks, we did it, but it doesn't appear yet. The last step to get the fracture to show something is we fractured it, now we have to explode it. So a lot of really fun names in these. It makes it kind of easy to remember. So remember, fracture it, then we're going to explode it. So it's actually called exploded view. But if you type explode, that's what it is. So you might think, hey, this pink one looks like what we want. You actually want this one over here, this one right here to go into here, not that left one. And now if we turn this on, we can see it is exploded. Ta-da! Isn't that neat? I think it's really fun. We can change the uniform scale, so like 0, no explosion, and then we can explode it. So we get all of our different pieces of rock. Honestly, this doesn't matter. It's just so that we can see all the pieces. Like it's neat to do that. If you don't quite like the pieces that you have, we could always go back. I'm going to select the scatter node, but I'm going to keep this one as my current viewing one. We could always, mess with that global seed, and it's going to change what pieces, where those objects are, so it explodes it differently. Like it's going to be a little bit different each time. So this is where stuff gets really fun and where you kind of come in almost as like a tool designer, because all of these things you can expose. So think of it kind of like when you do painter stuff and you make like your own PBR, you can expose certain attributes to give your artist the ability to alter it. We could expose certain attributes in here so that like, hey, we're just going to give them this tool, and then you can slide this slider or choose a different number, and it's going to come out differently. So, anything that you see that makes an alteration, we can always come in here and expose to the players. We're not going to do too much of that. We're going to do only a couple, for sake of time, and I don't want to throw too much at you at once. So we are at our exploded view. Are there any, does anyone have any questions about anything I've shown so far? Is this neat? Are you excited? What do you all think of this? Overwhelming?
What did you set the noise type for the mountain to?
I'm not going to go back because you're not supposed to be following along. You can watch the video when you're done. You're just supposed to be kind of watching.
Oh, yeah, I was just wondering. That's all.
Yeah, I think that's why I said last week Houdini is like magic. That's why I assume they call it, because it's very magical and amazing.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have a lot of fun with this program.
Yeah, so I'm trying. That's why I was like, so you kind of liked the Maya stuff, but what I'm also proposing is changing the class so you'd spend 6 weeks in Houdini instead. So think about that. Like, would you have preferred to skip the Maya stuff and just do Houdini for 6 weeks, possibly? Yes, this is really neat stuff. So Anthony asked, when they talk about integrating Houdini tools into game engine level builders, can use tools like this to fill scenes. Yes, you would build this tool out, and you can put these, you can have a built tool put into like Unity or Unreal, and then they would just kind of pull this tool up and just use it in the engine. So we're going to do something in a really simple way, but you can do really interesting things with this. Like, you could draw paths. So like the one thing that always excites environment artists, if you ever worked as an environment artist, is there are tools. Like, you could write a tool to make pipes where it just in Unity you just draw like lines, and then you do the pipe thing. Like, you turn the pipe tool on, you draw like some lines with 90-degree angles, and it just generates a pipe complete with corners and rivets and all that stuff. So rather than having to go in and, here's this piece for this piece, and then I'm going to attach the elbow to it, and then I'm going to, I need an extra long piece here, and oh no, it doesn't quite fit. You just literally draw a line and it sorts it out for you. Yeah. I don't think we're going to get too crazy deep with this tool because we only have, we have 2 more weeks after it with this. But I'm going to do my best to kind of get everyone started, and hopefully you will take it on afterwards. We're not going to do any kind of integration into the game engine this semester, just because it's really gray on how to get that for students. But we do pay for an educational license. So if we're in the classroom, we can do that no problem. Like, on our lab computers, we have those tools on the lab computers because we pay for a specific license for that for the school. So I didn't want to get into that this semester with the virtual stuff, but yes, you can do all that kind of stuff. Okay, kind of a segue. Let's kind of keep going on with this. So we have our exploded rock, but as of right now, this isn't really crazy useful for us. And we have a lot of things we need to do to this. We need to unwrap it, we need to make a material, we need to put it in some way so these are all at the origin, so that when we go to scatter them, we know where they are. Like, it's going to, be a little bit easier. You could also, if you weren't scattering it on a grid like we're going to do, you could also just export them all pretty easily. But the first thing we're going to do is we are going to, let's see, we need to first remesh these, and remesh is a little bit different than the polyreduce. So polyreduce reduces your polygons The remesh, we're actually going to kind of help. Do you see how we have a definite like pieces that are low poly? They're also n-gons, so that's not really what we don't want to work with n-gons. Those are big no-nos. So we're actually going to use a remesh node for this instead. And let me turn that on. And this is kind of like a way to, so for those of you in photogrammetry, you should, remesh is kind of like remesh in Maya, where it kind of fixes the surface for you where we don't have any n-gons anymore. It turns them all to tris. We can do it, let's see, the iterations, shoot, which one is this? Iterations, ups, no, we want to go down. If we put iterations at 0, it's nothing, like it's no reduction in polys, but it fixes the n-gons for us. It turns it all to tris. So if that's kind of what you're going for, that's helpful. But I probably just want to go, you know, we're losing a little bit. Which way does smoothing go? Smoothing down. Like we can keep it kind of faceted looking. But let's see. I do not like how it turns them to tris. This is something I don't have a lot of knowledge in, and it's something I need to research of how to make this quads instead. I feel like part of it has to do with something like that Bifrost, or is it Bitfrost engine, like something very similar to that. Like there is a way to do it. I just haven't done it yet because it would ultimately be better to have these in quads. But this is our first tool. This is our first tool, so it's perfectly fine that we're doing this into tris. So we have that. Let me just make sure I'm doing the same kind of settings. Smoothing, I'm going to set to 0.04. Target size, does this really make a difference? Yeah, it can. It can make it, it makes your edge length smaller. So we can get a little bit more resolution. My iterations, I'm going to set to 2. So a little smaller target size. All that. It didn't, the fracture didn't make it quads. It actually made a bunch of n-gons, and I can actually show that by jumping back up. Do you see how it made like these very flat, like this is how many side polys? I don't quite know. The fracture really messed that up, but it's fine because we're going to fix it with the remesh. Yeah, I need to research a little bit on how to make these quads. I know it's possible, I just don't know off the top of my head. But this is going to be a little bit easier to work with for game models. And, you know, we could tweak around all these settings if we wanted to. But I think for now, this is going to be fine. The next thing I do want to do is I do want to see, I want to start to look at my unwraps because we need to unwrap these. We kind of poly reduce them, and the easiest way to kind of see how these are going is there's a node in here called the quick shade, UV quick shade. And you can always like kind of have this off to the side, and you can always attach it to look at it and then like detach it. You can, if you need to, but this will just drop on a quick checkerboard. We can see, yeah, it's pretty horrible. John asked a question, do you want to add noise to the flat planes created by the shatter? No, I don't want to do that. I want it to actually look like fractured rock. We could, but I didn't want to make it too complex. I think this is going to be complex enough as a first go. If you want to experiment around with stuff later, like feel free, but for this one, we're not doing that. We're just going to add, you know, a lot of rocks look faceted like this, like they kind of came. We're going to be adding a texture too, which is going to add a lot. So the UV quick shade is an easy way to just kind of see where our unwrap is going. This isn't, it's necessarily the final one. It's just to kind of see where we're at with this. And what did I do with this? I have a connectivity node, but I don't remember what that does. Sorry, hold on. What is the purpose of this one? Okay. I think this is... Shoot, hold on. Let me just add the node and see what happens to it. I think I know what I have to do. I'm going to add a connectivity node. And let's see. And I think this is to help us with the next step, because ultimately what I need to do, and I'm going to go back and look at my notes and I can give you better reasons for this node after the demo. We need to step through all of these pieces, and we need to first unwrap each piece, and we also need to move it to the origin. And so we are going to be doing the same couple of steps for all of these pieces one at a time. And can anybody take a wild stab at some kind of concept we've used in the past when we have to iterate through something and do the same thing to everything in there? Yes, Anthony has it correct. We are going to use a for loop. Actually, specifically, we can use a for each loop. And I think that's what this, I think if I remember correct, that's what this connectivity node is for, is we're going to kind of say like all of these are kind of the same, like we're kind of making a grouping out of this. So rather than the connectivity type being a point, we're going to turn it to primitive so that we can, I think I'm 75% certain that's what this does. And like I said, I'm going to go back and check my notes after the demo. I don't want to pause everything and do that. Actually, I might take a break soon after we get through a little bit, and then I can look it up during that time. So we're going to do our connectivity node, say that we are all doing primitives, and then we are going to add our for each loop. So we can actually just type for each, and notice that we have a bunch of different options for these. We're going to use for each connected piece. So I think that's why we did the connectivity. Like, I'm pretty sure it's like we're saying, hey, all these are connected. Oh, it actually added it for us. Hold on. I guess I got my steps. Do you see that? I guess that's why it was there. Hold on. Let me go back. Let me back up. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me delete these nodes. For each connected piece. Oh, it does the connectivity node for us. So I'm going to link that up. I know it has it set to primitive automatically. Okay, so if you made that, it wasn't necessary because I guess this one does it for you. But notice we have a for each begin and then a for each end. And what's going to happen is we can then put nodes in there that will do this node to each piece in our set of rocks. So the first thing we can do is we can do our, why don't we unwrap it? So actually, if I go here, turn it on. Let me see, hold on. I want to make sure we can see this the way I want to see it. Oh, there it is, the individual rock. I was zoomed out. So we can see what we're going to get, we're on piece 14. It does do it 0 to 14. So that should be very familiar that the first thing is at 0, but we do ultimately have 14 pieces. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to unwrap it, and we're going to do an okay unwrap. It's not going to be like an amazing unwrap, but again, this is our first attempt at this, so it's fine if this isn't amazing. There are different unwrap types. If we do UV, we can kind of see all of them, and the one we're just going to work with is this UV project. Since we do kind of need it to be procedural, we can't go in there and like specify seams or anything like that, so we can just do our UV project. And if we turn it on, we don't want to keep it on orthographic. See the projection type. The one that kind of works best for this is going to be the polar one. So it kind of unwraps it like a sphere. It's not perfect, but it's good enough. And the way that we can see these, if you do want to look at the unwrap, up here, is it up here? No. It is, oop, persp, do you see perspective? We can switch it from set view to UV viewport. So we can see our UV viewport, and this is what that unwrap looks like. Ultimately, I'm going to put a toggleable texture on this, so it's fine that it's a little bit off. It's going to be toggleable, it doesn't matter. But I just changed to this view right here, UV view, set view. We can go to perspective. If you do want to look at multiple views, we can change that here. We could do like a 2 view side by side, and then you could have like one be your UV if you wanted to. Well, you look at this here. I'm just going to keep it to the single view though, but just know like this thing, this drop down here changes how things are rendered in the viewport too. So like if you want to just do the smooth shaded, get rid of those lines, etc., etc. Okay, so let's see. Oh, so it's good enough. It's good enough for what we need for our stuff. The other thing we do need to do, and if we turn this on, we can see. Oops, select it. They should all be unwrapped now. Why are you being weird? UV project. Hold on. Nope. I'm pretty sure it's working. I don't know why they're all a little bit different. Hold on. Let me go back and check my notes. Pretty sure this is fine. Sorry. It always weirds me out when something doesn't look quite the same. I think it's gonna be fine. Okay, I'm just going to keep going forward, and I'm going to see what it does in the next step. The other thing we need to do is we need to move these all to the origin so that we can utilize them later. And the way that we can do this is it's kind of like a weird trick of we're going to make just like a box at the origin, and then we're going to align our each piece to that box, so that it takes on its location. So let's see here. I'm going to right click. I'm sorry, I should have this on myself. There we go. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to put down a box. And then I am going to use my match size node. And I'm actually going to put it before the UV. There we go. And we're going to feed our box into there so that now they all kind of get jumbled together into that single one. I think this kind of fixes it too. I think because it kind of normalizes it all. Maybe that was my issue, but it looks pretty okay now. Match size, you know, we can see we can translate it. And it works good with that. Okay, so we matched the size, we did our UV project on all of them. Let's see, I think I want to take a bit of a break right now. Do you want to take a break? It's been like an hour. A lot for your head. All right, I'm going to pause this recording. There we go. So now that we had a little break, we're back. We're going to learn how to now kind of deal with these as individuals rather than kind of lumped together at the end of this for each loop. And we're going to do that with using a node called the blast node. And sorry, I'm going to get my notes back up. Oh, shoot. Sorry. Okay. Thank you for telling me. There you go. We're going to use something called a blast node so that it's going to be a way that we can kind of deal with these on a one-on-one basis. We're going to add it down here for blast. Put it down. And the setting that we do want to do to this is we want to delete non-selected. And we can come up here now, and the way that this kind of works is that we can tell it what group we want in here by clicking this down, and like you see we have like at piece 0, at piece 1, at piece 2. These are all of our individual pieces now. So we got piece 0, I'm going to delete that out, piece 1, and we can look at these all individually, except, you know, this is kind of like a weird, like it's hard to do that. It's not super easy to control. So we're going to make a little control to help us with this with the use of a null node kind of off to the side. You can almost kind of think of this as like a little bit of like a controller node. We're going to use this a null node with some attributes, parameters and attributes. I always get them mixed up in this program, to control which piece we're looking at in the blast node. So it might seem kind of weird at first, but let me kind of step through it, and once you see it kind of working in action, it might make a little bit more sense to what I'm saying. So I'm going to come over here and right click and do null. Let's do a null node right here, and the null node is literally like an empty game object, like from Unity. There's nothing, so we can do what we want with this now. We're not going to attach it to anything. It's just kind of going to be almost like our little controller. I'm going to rename this to something instead of null that's not very useful to us. I'm going to call it rockgen, because this is what we're going to use to tell us which piece of our big group of rocks do we want to have. So what we need to do with this is we need to set some parameters. That's what it is. We're going to set a parameter, and that's going to add something up here. And it's not necessarily attached to anything yet. We are literally, it's almost like we're setting almost like a variable that we're going to use in another place, but it's called a parameter here. So to do that, I'm going to select my node, and then up here, do you see how it has, like, you know, the settings? We're going to choose edit parameter interface, and we're going to add it here. And we have a lot of different parameter types that we can add, and that's why I said almost think of these almost like variables of like we can store a specific thing in there. We could do colors, we could do floats, we could do blah, blah, blah. But what we want to do is we want to have a number so that we can say we want piece 0 or piece 1, piece 2, piece 3, up to piece 14. So all we need is a integer. So don't have anything yet. I'm going to add an integer just from this list. And I'm going to give it the name of, what should I name this? I'm going to name it over here as rocknum. You kind of name it basically the same way as you name variables in, you know, programming language. And the label is just how it's going to appear here. So I'm just going to call it rock. I do only have 15 rocks, but we're starting at 0. So I don't want to accidentally try to get to a rock that doesn't exist. You know, we're basically working with a list, and if you try to access a list outside of the range, we're going to get we're going to have some problems. So I do want to make sure that my range for this is going to be 0 to 14. And let's lock those into place so we can't go past those. So we're not trying to access a rock piece that doesn't exist. I'm going to hit apply. And notice we now have it right here. It's very similar to what we were doing in Unity, where we put in our like our public stuff where we would want to get information from the user. It's the same kind of concept. It's just a little bit different of an interface. Same thing with kind of building out those windows from Maya. If you watch that video, they kind of did this a little bit in the video, and like they chuckled at how hard it is to do stuff in Maya with this and how easy it is to do here. I know this can be a little bit intimidating, but it's not any more complex than choosing what kind of parameter, like what kind of information is going to be stored in there, give it like a name so that like basically like a variable, so you can call this other places, and just how it's going to be labeled here, and giving it, you know, if we need to give it a range, what is that? So we are good with that. Apply, accept. And I mean, it doesn't do anything yet because it's literally just like an integer variable that kind of hangs out in space for now. We do have to set it up back over in our blast. So we want to literally get like the 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 15, all the way up to 14. And the way that we're going to do this is we want to make a reference to this right here. So I'm going to come over to where it says rock. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to say copy parameter, and it's going to copy this. We're going to copy that. And I'm going to go back over to the blast. And up here in group, we want to I'm first going to do the first one. At name is piece 0. And the thing that we want to change is we don't want to change the whole thing. We just want to literally change the number here based on whatever number we have currently on this null object we made rockgen that is just holding this variable. So it's just, you know, this is just an integer that we can change. We want to say, hey, we want to get piece, and I'm going to delete out this 0. And I'm going to right click in here and paste in the relative reference. That's what this is right here. And it's going to say that we want to paste, we're going to look at the rockgen, which is this null node. We want to look at that rock num variable, and whatever's stored in there, stick it on the end of this name piece. Okay. So if I go back now and select the rockgen, and I kind of slide up through, it is now, we can now pick exactly which rock piece we want. But I kind of want to emphasize, because I know it can be a little bit confusing what just happened. Rockgen honestly has nothing to do with this. We could call this whatever we want. It could just be like number holder or my parameter holder. But this is a really kind of common thing with Houdini. We're just using this to store this variable called what do we call that? Let's go back up into here. I forgot. I lost my train of thought. Rocknum. We made a variable called a rocknum. Whatever is being stored in there, paste that number on the end of this. So we still want to do like piece 0, piece 1, piece 2, piece 3. We're saying, hey, based on that slider, we want 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 14. So we can now kind of play with this. You know, we're going to control this through this. So it's like setting driven keys in Maya. I'm not quite certain what a driven key is. I've never played around with that. So I'm not quite certain. But it's just, I know that's also, I know this is kind of like a weird thing. These are now all of our rocks. Hooray. So we can now easily access this. So a couple other things we can do to kind of clean this up. It's always good, I've been told when doing Houdini, if you do a lot of like manipulation of geometry, you probably always want to renormalize it. So it's always good to throw on a normal node when you're about done to kind of help with your normal maps. I don't know if I don't actually see anything visually changing with this, but I've just been told to do this. And the normal node, I guess it's probably a pretty good one to know that exists, that there. I don't honestly see much of a change, but I've been told to do it, so we'll just do it. Maybe I just don't have a particular situation where you can see that much of a difference, but I've been told, hey, normals help. The last thing we do want to do as well is we do want to put a material on it before. There is a material node. We are going to have to build a material for this though. So I'm going to first attach it, but it's not going to do anything because we do need to actually put a material on it. I do kind of want to talk a little bit about that, but if there were any questions so far, I know it's kind of like probably not a lot of questions yet. It's probably going to be a lot of, I want to try this out and see what I get. I will supply you with the pieces to build your material. It's just going to be a real simple rock material. So I will attach them to the assignment once I'm done demoing. But making a material is in a different area. And if you've never made a material before, you probably haven't, or if you're trying to just figure that out, that's why this over here is handy, because we have our objects and we can, you know, select our objects, but we actually need to come here where it says matte. And notice this suddenly disappears. So if you're like, oh no, it disappeared, I need to go back to my object, you can just click back on object, then it'll come back. And then you can go to, you know, inside your object and find all your different nodes. So material. I'm going to go to the material palette right here, and I'm just going to make a generic material, which is just this principled shader. And it's just these, it does have some, you know, base ones too, but I don't really want to work with those. I just want to work with a principled shader. So I'm just going to drag one of these into here, and I'm going to just rename this to be rock shader so I know what it is. And it's not, like, I haven't gone too far deep into these materials, but all I'm really going to do is come over to, first I'm going to make this base color. Actually, why don't we do this? Now that I made the rock shader, let's just apply it so we can watch it change on our rock as we, as I add stuff to it, so you can see the changes that it makes. I'm going to go back over to material. Oops, let's go to rock. Oh no, I'm in a weird mode. I did it to myself again. Let's go to object. Hold on. There we go. I had to click back over off the material palette to over here on the object. Material. And now that I have a material, if I select this down here, I could come up to material. And with this thing right here, I can choose my rock shader. And I know it's super exciting right now, isn't it? But hey, it's a start. It's just the basic material. For this though, let me turn off, let's do smooth shaded. I'm now going to go back to my material. And I have this up here to mess with. So I can change the base color back to white. You can mess with some of the settings here, but I do want to add an actual texture to it. So I'm going to go to the textures tab. I'm going to say the base color is going to use a texture. I am going to locate that texture. And like I said, I'm going to provide these to you. I pulled these off of textures.com. Might as well. It's a tile texture. So we got that, and like I said, unwrap's not the greatest, but it's going to be good enough for what we're doing. Got that. We can also add a roughness, because I gave you a roughness. And we just got to locate it. And I'm going to adjust that roughness in a minute. I also want to go over to bump and normals and enable that and find my normal map. Back to the surface. Probably going to come and adjust this just a little bit. What is going on? Let's see. I'm still kind of new with this system, so I'm still trying to really figure it out. Use texture. What did I do with my other one? Hold on. Sorry, let me... It's looking really weird. I think I missed a step. Material 1.5.477. Let's see. It always shows me to take those, use places that says use point cloud and turn on use pack color instead. I don't think I need to make any changes to those. What are the other settings on here though? No, it's set the same. I think I would just have to play with it a little bit. But for our first material, it's going to be perfectly fine. So if I go back to my rock and I cycle through these, not too happy with that unwrap. I feel like something's broken with it. I'm gonna have to revisit this after the video and see if I can figure out what's going on with that. My other ones don't look so jagged, but I don't want to spend time on the video doing that. So strange. Okay. So we got our material done, and that's actually it as far as the basic rock goes. So we now have a bunch of little rock pieces that we can cycle through. We could do multiple things with this at the other end. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use this to create. I want to scatter all of these on a grid, which is what they call a plane here. So I'm going to take each individual one and randomly place them on a surface so that we can see them all at once. And the first thing I do want to do with this before I do that is I do need to create a subnetwork of this, and this is just basically me kind of packaging it together so that I want to make so that I can access it in another spot. I'm also going to expose this rock one so that I can edit it later. And let's see. And I do want to make sure before I do this, sorry, just make sure I have my ducks in a row. Okay. Before we do this, I do want to make sure that my material is turned on because that's what I'm going to see outside once I kind of package this up. And I do need to select all of my nodes. So I'm going to draw a box to select them. And then I'm going to click, you see like this boxed. This means create subnet from selected. So I'm going to click that and it packages it all kind of into there. And we can always go back in by double clicking it and we go back to where we are. So we're kind of like just grouping it all together. So the one control that we do need in here, why can't I see it? Hold on, what's going on? Why did it disappear? 1 second. I did something and broke it. do. Here, I'm going to pause the video for a second. I need to figure this out. So let's just keep moving forward and see if it fixes the issue I'm seeing. We need to be able to control this from out here. Like we want that to be out here so that we can see this and be able to choose what rock that we're seeing. So we're going to do something kind of similar to what we did in the other one, where we are going to add an attribute that we can work with. And we are going to do that the same kind of way that we did before, where we are going to go to our settings, edit parameter interface, and the first thing I need to do is I don't need any of these, so I'm going to make those invisible to kind of clean it up a little bit. But ultimately, we just need another integer. So I'm going to pull an integer out from here back into here. I'm going to give this a name of, let me just make sure I'm keeping it the same, rocks. And I'm going to give it just a label of rocks. We do want to make sure we lock the range from 0 to 14 again. And I'm going to hit apply. We get that there and hit accept. So the next thing that we need to do is we kind of need to set this up so that it controls our rock gen inside of here. So to do that, we need to copy the parameter. We're going to go inside of our subnet. We're going to find that rock gen, and we're going to then in here, actually can we just right click on it? Right, yeah. We're going to right click on the rock gen and paste relative reference. So it's going to reference all the way out to here. So let's see. And it's still broken. I'm going to pause it. I did something must have really broke. So let me pause this and see where I can figure it out. If you want to take a couple minute break, this might take me, wait, there it is. What happened? Is it just processing? Did you see that? It popped up for a second. Those are there. What are those doing there? Huh. Hold on. This is really curious because some of them are there and some of them are not there. All right, let me pause this. So I solved the problem by closing it and reopening it, and now it's working perfectly fine. That's game technology for you. So let me kind of reiterate what we just did with this. What we did was we packaged this into a subnet, and that was just with this one. We then went and we did a edit parameter interface just so that we could have an integer parameter on here that goes from 0 to 14 called rocks, so that we can connect this. So when we make a change, changing this is connected inside to our rock gen right here. So that changes, it changes this slider for us, and then this blast is looking at what number that is so that we can look at the correct piece. So it's like a nice little chain for us. Okay, so we have our individual pieces. The next stage for this is going to be to actually now scatter this on a surface. Let me open this thing back up to help me. We got our rock. We have our subnet inside the rock, and we kind of, I'm actually going to rename this now because we're not going to just deal with one rock. The subnet 1 we can actually rename as like our rock generator. So I'm going to call it rock gen, because this is what's going to be spitting out individual rocks. That's what all this is our rock the code to spit out one unique rock. And it's going to store 15 rocks for us. So I'm going to actually rename this whole project from rock now to just rock scatter. Because that's what it's going to be doing, is just scattering random rocks across a surface. Sorry, hold on one second. No. Not in here. Sorry, this dog is not used to being on a tether. It keeps wrapping itself up around things. Okay, that's probably why it got loose. So we have our rock scatter, and that's our kind of like our Uber project, where inside of it we have our rock gen, and now I'm going to create our ground plane that it's going to scatter on. It can be a little bit tricky to get, like, because you can make a grid from up here and drag it in, but I had a little bit of an issue of making it like inside of the project, because I don't want it to be like another object outside of here. I want it to actually be inside of rock scatter, kind of like how this is inside of rock scatter. So I am going to actually place my grid by right clicking in here and typing grid and doing it this way. And I can put the eyeball to see the grid, or the eyeball to see that one, so I can look at the individual pieces. So my entire tool is called rock scatter, and inside it I have my rock generator, and I have this grid that I'm just going to rename to ground plane, that we're going to use to scatter on it. We're actually going to use some very similar things from what we've already done to do this. The first thing is we just need to have some random points on here. We need 15 random points. So I'm just going to use a scatter node like we did earlier when we were trying to make those like points to find places to fracture our rock. Instead, we're going to use this to find random points on the surface. Obviously 1,000 is too much. We only have 15 rocks. So I'm going to turn the force total count down to 15. And these are going to be where our rocks are going to populate. And we can, again, adjust those by messing with the global seed if you don't quite like those positions. But it's just like a nice kind of random scattering inside that space of 15 points. So what we need to do is we need to take each rock coming out of our rock gen and put it to one of these points. So does anyone want to take a stab at a way that, a guess at how we can do this, where we need to step through all those rocks and put them at a random point? What concept are we going to use again? Yes, we're going to use a for each loop. So we are going to do another for each. And we're not doing a connected piece this time. We're going to do a point. So for each of those points from that scatter, we're going to step through all those points and we're going to put a rock at each of those points. So we have our for each point. It's a point one. It's not the kind we used before. We want to set this. So let's see, we scatter, we turn these on. We're going to have, again, 15 because we only have 15 points. So it's going to do this 15 times, 0 to 14. And we're just going to correlate, we have rock 0. We have rock 1, rock 2, rock 3, rock 4, rock 14. So we're going to be driving what gets put there based on like which iteration of the loop are we in. We can use a node called a copy to point node. We'll put that in there. And this, we can kind of look at some stuff. This first, oh, this is the wrong one because this is actually our point. We don't want this one. Oops, no, come back. There we go. So this here is the points that we want to copy something to. This one here wants the geometry we want to copy to each of those points. So that's where this one comes in. We want to copy the rock gen to each of those points. And this is expected because we are only going to be getting whatever rock we have currently in here. You see that? So, you know, we can get just the individual rock. That's kind of cool. But we want all of those rocks. We don't want just one rock. We want all 15 individual, yeah. It's dancing around. We want to run this based on which loop iteration are we in, and we're going to use that number. So if we're in 0, we want rock 0. If we're in iteration 1, we want to use rock 1. So like it's very easy to kind of conceptually think of, like, I'm sure everyone in this class, like, oh man, if I was in Unity and doing it in C#, I could totally just do it this way. You know, like it's the same kind of thing. So we want to tie in the iteration of our for each loop to this right here, this rock gen number. And the way that we do this is that we're going to come to our for each begin, and we need to click on this create meta import node, and it pops this thing over here, the for each begin metadata. And the interesting thing that this has in there is that this one stores which iteration of the loop we're in. So that's just, I was at the for each begin, clicked this create metadata, meta import node, and that's what this is. Did you all see did I give you videos about what the geometry spreadsheet is? Where it's like the list of attributes. You can see that, like if I go to, okay, so I'll make sure that's one of the videos that we see. It's possible, guys. It's hard to remember which one we did. So like, for instance, if I go geometry spreadsheet, it's just basically, we can see all of the rocks coming out of there. Is these all the rocks? I don't remember which these are. No, I think it's the individual points, individual vertices on the rock coming out, and its X, Y, and Z coordinates. Like we can see a whole bunch of information about that. So if you ever need to kind of look at parameters that are, I get parameters and attributes mixed up. The different parameters each things have, this geometry spreadsheet is like a handy way to do that. So if I go to this for each node here, and I come over, I don't want to look at points, I don't want to look at vertices, I don't want to look at primitives, I want to look at this group called detail. And notice that the detail tells me how many iterations there are and the numer iterations. I think that's just like, it's 1 through the number, or like how many times it goes through, where this one's like where it starts at 0 or something like that. But the key thing is we want to be able to access which iteration is our for loop in. And we know that this is called iteration. So that's where this is coming from, is from the geometry spreadsheet, just this detail view. So we're looking at the details of this for each begin metadata, and we want to specifically deal with that iteration. So let me go back to scene. This is stuff, I gotta triple check my notes on this one. Of course, this window is not big enough for me to read this. Okay, so I'm gonna do some typey types into here. So for the rock gen, what do we want to drive this? We don't want it to be this. We want a detail. Remember, we looked at the detail. We want something from the detail, a detail panel. And we set this up by first we have to tell it which detail, like where are you getting this from? We are going to get this from, and this is the double quotes, and I'll post this line of code in the project because it can be a little bit hard to see. I'll put a little thing there because this can be a little bit tricky. We want the detail we're looking at is on that for each begin metadata, this node. It's coming from here. So we're going to type ... for each, and notice that we do have an autocomplete. It's coming from there. That's where we're going to get that from. So I'm going to close my quotes because that's our object, comma, space. What variable, like what thing are we looking at? If you remember, we're looking at the iteration. And we want to set the last thing to 0 because we're just going to be stepping through the whole thing. That's just what has to go in that spot. And then we're going to hit enter. And you see how they instantly all changed because now for each thing as we step through, we're pulling our current iteration, and that's going to drive all of our, what gets placed. We're placing each one based on, all of that. So we're going to copy it to the point that is currently in our iteration based on all that stuff. And that is the whole demo. That is all I have. Were there any questions? Something's a little bit confusing, or I'll take some questions before I stop the recording and upload it in case there's anything handy coming out. Is everyone's brain just blown? What did I get myself into? This is why it's important for a programmer or artists to know a little bit of programming, because you can do some really fun things. No. That should just be working on an individual, like each one we go through. The iteration thing is strictly because we have to tell the rock gen which rock spitting out do you want. Where in here, the UV project is just going to be done on each thing coming through the pipe. So the only reason we had to do the iteration was because we need that number to tell it which one we need to put on that spot. I know it's a little bit weird, but like if you work with it, it starts to click a little bit better when you start to see where things are lining up, and it starts to get pretty interesting. What other questions? For which part? The rock gen one or the outside one? This thing? So we're doing it on the points, and we're saying, hey, each point, we're basically instantiating an object on each point. We're saying copy this object we have, put it on all of the points. It cycles through one by one and puts an object on all the points that we fed through into the for each loop. So for each point in the scatter, copy, instantiate a rock on it. Which rock should we instantiate? Base that on which loop iteration we're going through. Would it be helpful? Yeah, maybe in the future I should do that. Maybe in the future I should make a C# thing that does the same thing. Yeah, so rock 0 goes on point 1 or point 0. Rock 1 goes on point 1. Rock 2 goes on point 2. Rock 3 goes on point 3. We don't really need to deal. There's ways that you could do this where you could also randomize the points, like so, because like we randomized our rocks based on how we created them. But if you were doing it Like there's a lot of different ways you could do that, but like we made randomness with our rock creation, so we don't care if rock 0 goes with 0.0. Like we could make a list of like 1, 2, 3, 4, and it would correlate them directly. Other questions? Okay, I am going to stop the recording so that I can upload this.